Lucie Désirée Arnaz is an American actress and singer. She is the daughter of actors Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. Early life. Arnaz was born in Santiago de Cuba, Cuba, to Desiderio Alberto Arnaz y de Alberni II and Dolores Lolita de Aca y de Soches. His father was Santiago's youngest mayor and also served in the Cuban House of Representatives. His maternal grandfather was Alberto de Aca, an executive at rum producer Bacardi and Co. A descendant of the Cuban nobility, Arnaz was a great-great-great-grandson of José Joaquín. The Cuban Revolution of 1933 forced Arnaz and his family to lose everything and flee Cuba. A mob attacked and destroyed the family's houses, property, and livestock. Arnaz narrowly escaped the attack because he was able to hop in a car getting away. His father, Alberto Arnaz, was jailed and all of his property was confiscated. He was released after 6 months when his brother-in-law Alberto de Aca intervened on his behalf. The family then fled to Miami, where Desi attended high school. They came to United States with no money and Desi had to live with his father in a garage that was infested with rats and roaches. In the summer of 1934, he attended St. Leo Prep to improve his English. His first jobs included working at Woolworths and cleaning canary cages in Miami. He then went into the tile business with his father before turning to show business full-time. Professional career. Musician and actor. After finishing high school, Arnaz formed a band, the Siboney Septet, and began making a name for himself in Miami. Xavier Cugat, after seeing Arnaz perform, hired him for his touring orchestra, playing the conga drum and singing. Becoming a star attraction encouraged him to start his own band, the Desi Arnaz Orchestra. Arnaz and his orchestra became a hit in New York City's club scene, including a club named La Conga, where he is credited with introducing the concept of conga line dancing to the United States. He came to the attention of Rodgers and Hart who, in 1939, cast him in their Broadway musical Too Many Girls. The show was a hit and RKO Pictures bought the movie rights. Arnaz went to Hollywood the next year to appear in the show's movie version at RKO, which also starred Lucille Ball. Arnaz and Ball fell in love during the film's production and eloped on November 30, 1940. Arnaz appeared in several movies in the 1940s such as Bataan, starring Robert Taylor. His portrayal of Felix Ramirez, the jive-loving California National Guardsman, was described by New York Times critic Bosley Crowther as one of several supporting players who were convincing in soldier roles. Military service during World War II. April 27, 1943. Arnaz received his draft notice. However, Arnaz was disqualified from overseas service due to hypertension and knee injuries, which caused him pain with prolonged physical exertion, according to his military physical examination. He had injured his left knee prior to his enlistment and injured his right knee soon after enlisting on May 23, 1943, during a baseball game at Camp Arlington. He completed his recruit training, but was classified for limited service in the United States Army during World War II. He was assigned to direct United Service Organization programs at the Birmingham General Army Hospital in the San Fernando Valley. It was his responsibility to keep injured soldiers entertained while they were recovering in the hospital. Thanks to his Hollywood connections, Arnaz was able to bring celebrities to visit the hospital and boost morale of the soldiers. For example, discovering the first thing the wounded soldiers requested was a glass of cold milk, he arranged for movie starlets to meet them and pour the milk for them. Arnaz served 2 years, 7 months, and 4 days. His primary unit was the 9th Service Command, Army Service Forces. For his service during World War II, he was awarded the Army Good Conduct Medal, the American Campaign Medal and the World War II Victory Medal. Arnaz was discharged as a staff sergeant on September 30, 1945. Career post-military. Following his discharge as a staff sergeant on December 1, 1945, Arnaz formed another orchestra, which was successful in live appearances and recordings. He sang for troops in Birmingham Hospital with John Macchia and hired his childhood friend Marco Rizzo to play piano and arrange for the orchestra. For the 1946-47 season, Arnaz was the band leader, conducting his Desi Arnaz Orchestra, on Bob Hope's radio show on NBC. In 1951, Arnaz was given a game show on CBS Radio, Your Tropical Trip, in order to entice Arnaz and Ball to stay at CBS over a competing offer from NBC, and to keep Arnaz and his band employed and in Hollywood, rather than touring. The musical game show, hosted by Arnaz and featuring Arnaz's orchestra, had audience members competing for a Caribbean vacation. The program aired from January 1951 until September, shortly before the premiere of I Love Lucy in October. When he became successful in television, he kept the orchestra on his payroll, and Rizzo arranged and orchestrated the music for I Love Lucy. I Love Lucy /I. None. Desilu Productions. With Ball, Arnaz founded Desilu Productions in 1950, initially to produce the vaudeville-style touring act that led to I Love Lucy. At that time, most television programs were broadcast live, and as the largest markets were in New York, the rest of the country received only kinescope images. Karl Freund, Arnaz's cameraman, and even Arnaz himself have been credited with the development of the multiple camera setup production style using adjacent sets in front of a live audience that became the standard for subsequent situation comedies. The use of film enabled every station around the country to broadcast high-quality images of the show. Arnaz was told that it would be impossible to allow an audience onto a sound stage, but he worked with Freund to design a set that would accommodate an audience, allow filming, and adhere to fire and safety codes. Due to the expense of 35mm film, Arnaz and Ball agreed to salary cuts. In return, they retained the rights to the films. This was the basis for their invention of reruns and syndicating TV shows. In addition to I Love Lucy, he executive produced The Ann Sothern Show and Those Whiting Girls, and was involved in several other series such as The Untouchables, Whirlybirds, and Sheriff of Cochise / United States Marshal. While he was producing The Untouchables, Arnaz was allegedly the target of a mafia murder plot, which was later called off, due to the show's negative publicity of gangsters. These allegations were made in the 1980s by Jimmy Fratianno in his book, The Last Mafioso. Arnaz denied these claims were true. He also produced the feature film Forever, Darling, in which he and Ball starred. The original Desilu company continued long after Arnaz's divorce from Ball and her subsequent marriage to Gary Morton. Desilu continued to produce its own programs in addition to providing facilities to other producers. In 1962, Arnaz sold his share of Desilu to Ball and formed his own production company after their divorce. With the newly formed Desi Arnaz Productions, he made the mothers-in-law for United Artists Television and NBC. This sitcom ran for 2 seasons from 1967 to 1969. During its 2-year run, Arnaz made 4 guest appearances as a Spanish matador, Señor Delgado. Arnaz's company was succeeded in interest by the company now known as Desilu, 2. Desilu, 2 and Lucille Ball Productions worked hand-in-hand with MPI Home Video in the home video reissues of the Ball/Arnaz material not owned by CBS. This material included Here's Lucy and The Mothers-in-Law, as well as many programs and specials Ball and Arnaz made independently of each other. Later career. In the 1970s, Arnaz Co hosted a week of shows with daytime host and producer Mike Douglas. Vivian Vance appeared as a guest. Arnaz also headlined a Kraft Music Hall special on NBC that featured his 2 children, with a brief appearance by Vance. Arnaz suffered a severe attack of diverticulitis in 1971, which required an operation and several years of recovery. He worked with Universal Studios for 2 years working on development deals for 2 shows that eventually fell through, Dr. Domingo and Chairman of the Board starring Elke Sommer. Arnaz moved on to work on his autobiography for 2 years. To promote his autobiography, a book, on February 21, 1976, Arnaz served as a guest host on Saturday Night Live, with his son, Desi, Jr., also appearing. The program contained spoofs of I Love Lucy and The Untouchables. The spoofs of I Love Lucy were supposed to be earlier concepts of the show that never made it on the air, such as I Love Louie, where Desi lived with Louis Armstrong. He read Lewis Carroll's poem Jabberwocky in a heavy Cuban accent. Desi Jr. played the drums and, supported by the SNL band, Desi sang both Babalu and another favorite from his dance band days, Cuban Pete. The arrangements were similar to the ones used on I Love Lucy. He ended the broadcast by leading the entire cast in a conga line through the SNL studio. In 1976, CBS paid tribute to Lucille Ball with the 2-hour special CBS Salutes Lucy, the first 25 years. Both Ball and Arnaz appeared on the screen for the special, which is the first time they appeared together in 16 years since their divorce. When asked about returning to television in a 1976 newspaper article, Arnaz said, "People ask me to go back on TV, but the thing is, it's too tough competing with the Ricky Ricardo of 20 years ago. He looks a lot better than I do." Arnaz made a guest appearance on the TV series Alice, in 1978, starring Linda Lavin and produced by I Love Lucy co-creators Madeline Pugh and Bob Carroll, Jr. His last acting role was as Mayor Leon Quiñones in the 1982 film, The Escape Artist. Arnaz owned the Indian Wells Country Club in Palm Desert, CA. He also taught classes at San Diego State in studio production and acting for television. Personal life. Beliefs. Arnaz and Ball decided that the show would maintain what Arnaz termed basic good taste and were therefore determined to avoid ethnic jokes, as well as humor based on physical handicaps or mental disabilities. Arnaz recalled that the only exception consisted of making fun of Ricky Ricardo's accent. Even these jokes worked only when Lucy, as his wife, did the mimicking. Arnaz was also a lifelong Catholic. Politics. A lifelong Republican, Arnaz was deeply patriotic about the United States. In his memoirs, he wrote that he knew of no other country in the world where a 16-year-old kid, broke and unable to speak the language, could achieve the successes that he had. He was a supporter of Richard Nixon and member of the Spanish-speaking committee for the re-election of the president in 1972. Nixon appointed Arnaz as the U.S. roving ambassador to Latin America in the early 1970s. He was a supporter of Ronald Reagan and spoke at campaign rallies, such as one hosted by the National Republican Hispanic Assembly in 1980. He was an advocate for the Hispanic community, encouraging them to take the 1980 census to increase federal funding for their communities. Marriages. Arnaz and Lucille Ball were married on November 30, 1940. Their marriage was always turbulent. Convinced that Arnaz was being unfaithful to her and also because he came home drunk several times, Ball filed for divorce in September 1944, but returned to him before the interlocutory decree became final. Arnaz and Ball subsequently had 2 children, actors Lucie Arnaz and Desi Arnaz Jr. Arnaz's marriage with Ball began to collapse under the strain of his growing problems with alcohol, gambling, and infidelity. According to his memoir, the combined pressures of managing the production company, as well as supervising its day-to-day operations, had greatly worsened as the company grew much larger, and he felt compelled to seek outlets to alleviate the stress. Arnaz also suffered from diverticulitis. Ball divorced him in 1960. When Ball returned to weekly television, she and Arnaz worked out an agreement regarding Desilu, wherein she bought him out. Edith MacHirsch was Arnaz's second wife. After the two married on March 2, 1963, he greatly reduced his show business activities. The two were married for 22 years until Edith died in 1985, aged 67, from cancer. Although Arnaz and Ball both married other spouses after their divorce in 1960, they remained friends and grew closer in his final decade. "I Love Lucie was never just a title," wrote Arnaz in the last years of his life. Family home video later aired on television showed Ball and Arnaz playing together with their grandson Simon shortly before Arnaz's death. Health. Arnaz suffered from knee injuries as a young man shortly before and during his military service in World War II. The pain was troublesome enough that he was disqualified from serving overseas. In the late 1960s, he was seriously injured in an accident when the floor collapsed and he was impaled by a tree stump in his home in Baja California. An operation saved his life, although his health was never the same after the incident. Throughout his life he periodically had to seek medical treatment for diverticulitis and intestinal issues, sometimes requiring hospitalization. After his second wife Edith's death in 1985, Arnaz was persuaded by his children to seek treatment for his decades-long alcohol addiction, which by then had seriously damaged his health. Lucie Arnaz described her pride at attending a treatment meeting with her father where he stood up and said, "I'm Desi, and I'm an alcoholic." Arrests. Arnaz had a few run-ins with the law. He was arrested in 1959 on an intoxication charge while he was walking Hollywood Boulevard. In 1966, he was arrested and charged with assault with a deadly weapon after an altercation with youth parking in front of his house. Two young men were allegedly partying nearby and harassing his then 15-year-old daughter Lucie and her friend. Arnaz confronted them, threatened to shoot their tires and cars, and then fired 2 shots that went into the ground. He spent 3 hours at the San Diego jail and was released on $1,100 bail. Later life. Desi Arnaz spent his retirement doing activities he enjoyed, including sailing his yacht, fishing, and cooking Cuban dishes. He suffered from numerous health issues later in life. He contributed to charitable and non-profit organizations, including San Diego State University. He was active in politics and made occasional public appearances. He was the guest of honor at the Carnival Miami in March 1982 where he performed with his children, Lucie and Desi, Jr., in front of a crowd of 35,000. Arnaz was known to be very loving to his grandchildren. Thoroughbred racing. Arnaz and his second wife eventually moved to Del Mar, California, where he lived the rest of his life in semi-retirement. He owned a horse breeding farm in Corona, California, and raced thoroughbreds. The Desi Arnaz Stakes at Del Mar Racetrack is named in his honor. Death. Arnaz was a regular smoker for much of his life and often smoked cigarettes on the set of I Love Lucie. He smoked cigars until he was in his 60s. Arnaz was diagnosed with lung cancer in 1986 and underwent treatment. Lucille Ball visited him during this time in the hospital and the two watched VHS tapes of I Love Lucie. His daughter Lucie was by his side constantly during his final days. On November 30, 1986, on what would have been their 46th wedding anniversary, Ball telephoned him and they spoke for a short time, including saying "I love you." She finished by saying, "All right, honey. I'll talk to you later." He died 2 days later on December 2, 1986, at the age of 69. Arnaz was cremated and his ashes scattered. Ball was one of hundreds to attend Arnaz's funeral, which was held at St. James Roman Catholic Church in San Diego County, California. His death came just 5 days before Lucille Ball received the Kennedy Center honors. He was predeceased by his second wife, Edith, who had died a year earlier on March 23, 1985. His mother outlived him by almost 2 years. Legacy. Desi Arnaz has 2 stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, one at 6301 Hollywood Boulevard for contributions to motion pictures and one at 6250 Hollywood Boulevard for television. Unlike his co-stars, Arnaz was never nominated for an Emmy for his performance in I Love Lucy. However, as executive producer of the series, he was nominated 4 times in the Best Situation Comedy category, winning twice. In 1956, he won a Golden Globe for Best Television Achievement for helping to shape the American comedy through his contributions in front of and behind the camera of I Love Lucy. He was inducted into the Television Academy's Hall of Fame. The Lucille Ball Desi Arnaz Center Museum is in Jamestown, New York, and the Desi Arnaz Bandshell in the Lucille Ball Memorial Park is in Celeron, New York. Desi Arnaz appears as a character in Oscar Hulas's 1989 novel The Mambo Kings Play Songs of Love and is portrayed by his son, Desi Arnaz Jr., in the 1992 film adaptation, The Mambo Kings. Maurice Benard portrayed Desi Arnaz in the 1991 television film Lucy and Desi, Before the Laughter. In the 2003 television film Lucy, Desi Arnaz was portrayed by Danny Pino. Arnaz was portrayed by Oscar Nunez in I Love Lucy. A funny thing happened on the way to the sitcom, a comedy about how Arnaz and Ball battled to get their sitcom on the air. It had its world premiere in Los Angeles on July 12, 2018, co-starring Sarah Drew as Lucille Ball and Seamus Dever as I Love Lucy creator-producer-head writer Jess Oppenheimer. The play, written by Jess Oppenheimer's son, Greg Oppenheimer, was recorded in front of a live audience for nationwide public radio broadcast and online distribution. BBC Radio 4 broadcast a serialized version of the play in the UK in August 2020, as Lucy Loves Desi, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Sitcom, starring Wilmer Valderrama as Arnaz and co-starring Anne Heche as Lucille Ball. On March 2, 2019, Google celebrated what would have been Arnaz's 102nd birthday with a Google Doodle. Javier Bardem portrayed Arnaz in the 2021 biographical film Being the Ricardos, written and directed by Aaron Sorkin and produced by Amazon Studios, alongside Nicole Kidman as Ball. He was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Actor. Filmography. As actor, none. As producer, none. As writer, none. As director, none. Soundtracks. 1940, Too Many Girls. 1941, Father Takes a Wife, Mi Amor. 1942, Four Jacks and a Jill. 1946, Desi Arnaz and His Orchestra, Taboo, Pin Marin, aka Melody Masters, Desi Arnaz and His Orchestra USA. 1949, Holiday in Havana. 1956, Forever, Darling. 1952, I Love Lucy, aka Lucy in Connecticut USA, aka The Sunday Lucy Show USA, aka The Top 10 Lucy Show USA. Lucy and Bob Hope TV episode, Ricky's European Booking TV episode, Cuban Pals TV episode. 1958, The Lucy Desi Comedy Hour, aka We Love Lucy USA. Lucy Wins a Racehorse TV episode. 2001, I Love Lucy's 50th Anniversary Special, aka The I Love Lucy 50th Anniversary Special USA.